Hi, Pine Road, fourth graders. It's Mrs. Smith again. We're going to be reading The Wild Robot Escapes, and we are starting with chapter 54, which is called The Mountains. The flat plains of farm country gradually rolled into hills and valleys. There were fewer crops, fields, and more forests. The hills grew taller, the valleys sank deeper, and the farm disappeared entirely. Our friends had reached the mountains. Brightbill floated on the air as Rose climbed to the slopes. They passed the craggy rock formations and rushing waterfalls and meadows lush with flowers. The robot could have hiked on, never slowing or stopping. But the goose needed a rest. As the stars came out each evening, they found a safe location to settle down. Frost was common in the higher regions, and Roz took a lighter from her tool belt and built a small campfire to keep her son warm. They sat around the crackling flames, reminiscing about life on the island, until Bright Bill would fall off to sleep. As the sun came up each morning, they clear away all the traces of their campsite and set off again, deeper into the mountains. Eagles perched on jagged cliffs. Fish splashed through gurgling streams. Chipmunks bickered in the thick undergrowth. It felt good to be back in the wilderness. But this place wasn't home, so the travelers kept a brisk walk. The robot adjusted her camouflage to match her surroundings, and in the forest she wore leaves and tree bark. In the meadows she wore grass and wildflowers, and in the rocky terrain she wore dirt and weeds. Even way out there in the wilderness, she wanted to go unseen. What Roz didn't realize was she was already being watched. Oof. What's your prediction? Who's watching her? Chapter 55, The Attack. Wide mountains, meadows made the robot nervous. While hiking around them, she felt exposed and easy to spot. Camouflage helped, but it was hard not to notice a walking clump of flowers, especially when accompanied by a goose. And it was one of those wide meadows that trouble caught up with our friends. From the corner of her eye, Roz sensed movement. She turned, but saw only tall grass blowing in the breeze. Then a twig snapped, but the sound was swallowed by a distant roll of thunder. It wasn't until the wind changed and a musky scent wafted by the robot understood the danger. "I smell wolves," whispered Roz. Brightbill's eyes grew big and round, and he whispered back, "What should we do?" Before Roz could reply, two wolves leaped out from the brush. They charged toward the robot, snarling and snapping their jaws. Roz heaved her son toward the sky so that he could fly to safety, and then she burst into a sprint. The robot zigged and zagged across the meadow, trying to shake off those wolves. But when she dashed through a patch of soft ground, she slipped and toppled into the grass. The wolves quickly surrounded their prey, heads low, ears drawn back. Deep growls rumbling their teeth. "Remember us, Roz?" said the huge male with the scar. "Hello again, Shadow," said the robot, getting to her feet. "And I believe your name is Barb?" "You have a good memory," said the female wolf. "Actually, I have a perfect memory," said the robot. "And yet you've forgotten your rifle." A toothy smile appeared on the Shadow's face. "You aren't so tough without your rifle, are you?" Barb sniffed the breeze. "Where's your pet goose?" And then she saw Brightbill perched in a lone tree in the middle of the meadow. "He's not my pet," said Roz. "He's my son." Shadow chuckled. "We've heard the stories about the robot mother and her son, the goose. They're very touching." He turned and barked. "Join us, Brightbill. We'd love to meet you up close." "Stay where you are, son," hollered Roz. "I will take care of them." "You'll take care of us," growled Shadow. "No, Barb and I will take care of you." The robot's computer brain hummed as it tried to make a plan. The wolves were stalking toward her. Any second now, they would attack. Roz had to do something, anything, so she stalled. "Shadow, Barb, is it just the two of you?" Roz scanned the meadow and saw no other wolves. "Where's the rest of your pack?" Well, that was a wrong question to ask because the fur on Shadow's back stood up and he snarled, "This is my pack now." Then the wolves pounced, but Roz wasn't there. With all the strength in her legs, the robot launched herself up and away. and now she was roaring through the air in a long, graceful arc. Once her feet stomped back to the ground, she launched herself up and away again. With a giant arching strides, the robot bounded across the meadow and in direction of her son. At first, the wolves were baffled by the robot's strange escape, but they were expert hunters. They raced after her, studying her closely, watching where she landed. And when Roz made her final leap toward Brightbill's tree, a heavy paw knocked her off her balance. She tumbled through the air and slammed against the trunk. Leaves shook loose. Dead branches crashed down, but the robot held tight to the tree. "Are you okay, Ma?" the goose said as he fluttered to his mother's side. "Just some light scrapes," said the robot as she pulled herself into the sturdy branch. You can see her launching herself up, and you can see the wolves. Below the tree, the wolves were howling with laughter. "Nice try, Roz," said Shadow. "But you can't outrun us. Wolves are built for chasing." "You're wasting your time," said the robot. "You cannot eat me, and you will never catch my son." "You still don't get it, Roz," growled the wolf. "I'm not hunting you for food. I'm hunting you for revenge." Chapter 56, The Torch. Our friends were stuck in that tree. They sat in the upper branches high above the wolves, trying to calculate an escape. Brightbill could fly off whenever he liked, but Roz had to come down eventually, and when she did, the wolves would be ready. Shadow and Barb stretched out in the shade. They glanced around, licked their fur, sniffed their mountain air. The wolf looked uncomfortable, and yet there was tension between them. "I'm hungry," growled Barb. "I want to eat robins and deer, or maybe go back to the farm country and prey on livestock. Anything is better than hunting a creature you can't even eat." "You can eat all the animals you like," said Shadow, "after we kill that robot." Barb grumbled with frustration. She didn't understand Shadow's need for revenge, but for now she stayed loyal to her mate. Day turned to night, and the wolves started yawning. Barb's eyelids became heavy. Shadow's body became weary, and the soothing song of the crickets lulled them both to sleep. The sight of the sleeping wolves reminded Roz of those long winter nights on the island when the wild animals crawled into her warm home and slept. She remembered the frightened look in their eyes, and they saw the fire the first time, and this gave Roz an idea. Quietly, she broke off the dead branch of the tree trunk. Then she took a lighter from her tool belt, held the flame under the branch's knobby end until it was blazing, and then she dropped down to the ground. Shadow and Barb snapped awake to find the world bathed in orange light. Towering above them, looking like a demon, was the robot. Her eyes were glowing. Her mouth was roaring. In her hand was a torch, flames rippling, embers whirling into the air. The wolves had never seen fire. It was beautiful, and it was terrible. Deep inside, they felt their wolf instincts telling them this ball of swirling light was dangerous. Their instincts told them to run for their lives, and when Roz lunged toward them and they ran, Barb yelped, Shadow whimpered, and the two wolves raced away from the fire just as fast as they could. Chapter 57, The Stones. At first light, Roz nudged Brightbill awake from the travelers, continued north through the mountains. The goose stood on her mother's shoulders as she marched. Her eyes darted around nervously, searching for any signs of the wolves, but the wolves were gone. And our friends turned their attention to a new problem. The weather out there was always changing. Roz and Brightbill had never seen many calm, sunny days suddenly turn into wind or fog or sleet or even snow. Our friends expected bad weather, so they hardly noticed when heavy rain came sweeping down the valley. But there was something odd about this rain. Brightbill squinted on the oncoming storm and said, "Ma, why is the rain bouncing off the ground?" Bouncing rain? That didn't seem right. The robot's computer brain went to work, and she found the correct word. "That's not rain," she said. "That is hail." Clang! The hailstone bounced off of Roz's chest. Another one swooshed into the weeds. Then the sky opened up and hailstones were everywhere. They tore through the leaves and branches. They ricocheted off rocks and roots. They flattened flowers and bushes. To the robot, the hailstones were annoying, and to the goose, they were deadly. A stone hit Brightbill's shoulders. As he fell to the ground, Roz scooped him up, hunching over, protecting him from the falling stones. But the hailstorming might kill a poor bird if they couldn't find cover soon. Frantically, the robot scanned the area for any type of shelter, and there it was. On the far side of the valley, beside the winding river, was a cabin. Yay! It was old and shabby, but it had a roof, and that's what our friends needed most. Roz held her son close, pumped her legs, and thundered across the valley. Heavy hailstones hissed into the grass and squelched the mud and clanged off the robot. There was a soft thump, and Brightbill cried out. In pain, Roz bounded over the rushing river in a single leap, landed without breaking stride, and kept running. Now she could hear the hailstones crackling against the cabin louder and louder, and the robot stomped up in the front door, turned the handle, and stepped inside. There's a lot of figurative language in that chapter. The hailstones hissed into the grass and squelched into the mud and changed off their robot. There's other ones throughout. Maybe you'll be able to hear someone I'm reading. We're going to stop there. That was chapter 57. We'll start chapter 58 tomorrow. And make sure you go in and look for your questions to answer and complete them and turn them back to your teacher. Great job, boys and girls.